Okay, we're live. Hello, everyone. Welcome back to another exciting episode of the Cyber-Footdy, the show where we actually talk about cybersecurity, football, food, most importantly, cybersecurity that actually matters for the subcontinent of Africa and globally. I'm your host, Nasir, and today's episode is one every founder, a CTO, a project manager, and even startups or operators need to hear. So we're actually exploring a critical topic. It's cyber risk management for scaling African startups. So in the current episodes, we have been dealing with SMEs, startups. So all these is to support in building a secure growth from day one when you start your own business. So joining me is someone I hold very in high regard, Mr. Samuel Modupe. He's somebody I've known from a long time ago, a seasoned cybersecurity leader with deep experience in both the engineering of cybersecurity, risks, governance, and also a cybersecurity leader. So, of course, he has CISSP, CISM, all these has led him to actually lead a fintech rover, which I think from the research I've done, you've previously worked as an engineer, cybersecurity engineer in Union Bank, and I can see from your feed that you are really involved with ISACA or ISC2 at the Nigerian chapter, which you contribute a lot to the growth of the cybersecurity maturity across the sector as well. Samuel, it's great to have you with us today. So I'll just try to jump in. Let's begin with the foundational questions. Why actually should startups, especially in Nigeria specifically, care about cybersecurity very early when they're starting up? Even though I would say cybersecurity is not like our main concern when starting a business or for startups. For example, I would think Rover is still more like graduating from a startup area in the fintech landscape. So what do you think, for example, from your own experience in Rover? Why should you care about cybersecurity? I know it's fintech, so that means a lot of payment aspects in terms of security needs to be incorporated, PCI DSS and stuff. So, but looking outward to other types of businesses, not just fintech, why do you think people like that should actually care about cybersecurity, especially in the early stages? Okay, so you mentioned trust quite a few times. My main issue here is that why you think generally fintechs, we have quite a lot, OP and the rest, don't actually report these incidents? Because what we normally have from the data is we have so amount of money lost, especially from the financial sector to cybercrime. But we don't know from where, because even the major banks, not to talk about fintechs, they don't even report it. So what do you think? Hmm. Hmm. Yeah. Okay. I think we've established like a baseline for this. So I would like based on your experience, since I would assume you're in charge of the security aspect of the or part of the security infrastructure at Rover. Take some practical scenarios, like in terms of incident response. So what are the steps do you think so that other people that have their own startups or their fintechs that these are things that they normally should do in terms of reporting incidents. So, for example, you were hit. I know some few days ago, Cloudflare was down, all these things. Let's say, for example, the first scenario I want to present is not a hack, basically. Let's say you're also affected by this kind of outage, like Cloudflare. How do you manage that particular situation? Mm. Hmm. So, but I understand these things, which are very excellent. I think even for every startup to basically, they must have all these policies, incident response plan, emergency responses, all these things have to be in place. But when you look at the situations, not only in Nigeria, but in the maybe sub-Saharan African continent, you look at going back to an example in Nigeria now, the trust has already been lost, especially not only in fintechs, mostly, but in the financial sector. Now, we have realized that all the breaches are communicated to all the customers as downtime. So, what do you think about these kind of Nigerians are not actually dumb, They always have a way to find out what has actually happened, and stuff. But we always have these issues of either it's an upgrade, or something that is happening for weeks non-end that we have seen in the past, because I don't want to mention like all these names. But what do you think about this kind of ways or that these financial institutions go about these things instead of coming? I know there is the reputational damage and stuff that they're trying to prevent, but then there has to be like a mechanism that will efficiently like deliver the message without kind of damaging the image of the bank, and still keeping customers' trust, as you've been mentioning. Yeah. 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 I know. Mm.
Possibly, I don't know, maybe at management level or at some level, but they are the one that actually communicates that to the general public because communication matters. It really, really matters. I don't want to say you're lying, but typically, how can you communicate that an issue has happened and the business won't suffer for it? So those are just some of the pros and cons. And also note that it's also geographical location. In the US, Cloudflare has gone down. Say there was a configuration mistake or there was
Yeah.
something that was done, and this was how it's cascaded.
An
Look at
update.
a
Yeah.
AWS instance of DNS with DynamoDB. You can get all of
Mm.
those nitty gritties, but in Africa, it's totally different because
Exactly.
you get totally different. Looking at communication, you also look at your audience. One of the things with communication, you also look at your audience. What can they handle? At some level of information that you need to give out, or some level of information you don't need to give out. That's just what I was saying.
Okay. So I would like to tap in from your past experience. Like, I wouldn't say transitioning, but yeah, transitioning from maybe a mainstream traditional banking sector to a fintech, maybe a growing startup. What do you think are the major mistakes or guides that these kind of startups can learn from the traditional banking sector?
See, just trying to get it. So they're like two extremes. It comes even from a cultural point of view. The traditional banks, mainstream banks have this bureaucratic process. Traditional, we have
Yeah.
cadence. You have so many cadence. While in the startup, you have the culture is different. You can air your opinion. You have an open door policy. You have all of that, and it supports an agile environment where you can be agile. You can feel fast, but actually, in the traditional, you can't feel fast. You have to go through levels of approval we get before you get there. However, the traditional mainstream bank has processes and controls that ensures that they are not that exposed to attacks or to risks. They're able to manage their risks well. While from the startup point of view, it's always on fire. Let's go to market, let's go to market. So getting the balance is ensuring that you have some of the controls that these organizations that have lived 10 years, 20 years, they've matured with these controls and see how you can marry them with the startups so that you can learn from their mistakes, you can learn from their maturity and ensure that you have all of these
Okay.
controls
Yeah.
in
Mhm.
place. So those are just some of the things that you will need to put in place to ensure that as an organization, as a startup, you are benefiting from the level of maturity that these organizations have and has kept them standing to where they are. Because one thing for the traditional mainstream bank, they're looking at how well they can transit next generation, how well they can continue to survive, how well they can continue to stay afloat. But the startup is how well can I scale? How well can I make more money? How well can I
Yeah.
become profitable? So you see the preferences are different. One is looking at
Yeah. Yeah.
stability, ensuring that I can still stay while this is just looking at. So as a startup, you see how you can marry that where even though you are solving problems of today, you want to ensure that in the next year you continue to exist. In the next 10 years or even 20 years, you continue to exist.
Perfect. I think that will set like the tone at least for the comparison that maybe some people have. But then when you look at, for example, the fintechs, we have so many in Nigeria, so many popular ones, so many less popular ones. What do you think about the level of KYC that they normally do from your own experience? Because we know the fintechs, even though their policy is set by the CBN, and they are still cutting corners with their reputations that we have. I mean, you can open an account by the street side, in a minute without actually doing so many things like submitting enough documents. You can get your card, you can everything by the roadside. So, what do you think about the KYC and cutting corners and the reputations of these Nigerian fintechs specifically? Yeah, yeah, But don't you think that is what the NIN does, or the BVN, sorry, does? Yeah, yeah. So does that mean that we have every bank has its own, every fintech have its own, they have their own, NFIU has their own, police have their own, Is it that the case? Okay.
That knows that once I miss it in one place, I missed it in every other place. But instances now is that fraud happens here, that same person runs away or leaves, goes to another bank or to another fintech, commits the same thing. I don't know if you get me. So having that
Yeah.
shared database for fraud would really, really help to ensure that those fraud cases reduce drastically.
Okay. Thank you. Knowing Nigerians, I'm sure that will actually help and go a long way. But when we're looking at it as a complex economy like Nigeria and complex society, look at our major concern is not even the fraud cases, but mostly right now, especially with the fintechs, it's more of money laundering, funding illegal activity, insurgency, and stuff. So those are the like underlying issues that people use, especially with the use of the POSs of the fintechs. So what do you think about bringing us back to the POS policy? I think there's a new CBN policy on POS on geolocation based stuff. So what's your opinion on the impact that is going to have on these cases, not only fraud, but funding activities and stuff? Do you think it will be to really do something? Because it's going to negatively affect like legitimate owners, but then do you think it will have that much of an effect on the criminals? Somewhere? Mm. Mm, mm, mm. But the geotagging for the POS terminals, is it, I'm talking about the details because I have not gotten hold of the details of the policy. Is it like, because I'm thinking if I'm a startup and I'm in a building A going to, or a restaurant like a hotel, if the POS is in the reception and you need to go to like 15th floor or something, or another building, is that going to affect, or it's much more wider than like what you said? If it's like it's going to be like a vicinity like Mushin, for example, or like Lagos policy. So is it within a smaller location, or like vicinities, like let's say, like you give an example like Mushin, the entirety of it? Or is it if I go within blocks or from the reception to another building, it's going to be problematic? Yeah.
Just like GPS. You know, your GPS, Google Map will
Yeah.
give you the
Mm.
position exact where you are. So geotagging helps those POS terminals because typically smart devices have GPS. So you're able to have that GPS detail along with the transaction.
Yeah.
That's what, so you get that precise GPS location.
So that means, for example, for a legitimate business, I cannot move from that specific location to another location to perform my business. Fintechs, what advice would you like give them in terms of starting very well in terms of the security infrastructure and outlook? Mm. Mm. Yeah, it's back now. So you were saying, give you an example. Mm-hmm. Mm. Mm. Okay, perfect. Thank you very much. And normally we like to end with like a fun segment. So like it's like a rapid fire question that I will give you then between two options and you choose one. So cloud or on-prem, which one do you prefer? MFA or strong passwords? DevOps or DevSecOps? So in terms of your security outfit, do you prefer to hire early or hire afterwards? Like when you're starting the startup, do you immediately go and incorporate, start with a security person or later on when everything is established? Okay. So like a third party. Mm. Mm. Okay. So Google Workspace or Microsoft 365? Okay. Tea or coffee? Chicken or beef? Okay. Stay home and chill or go out for chilling normally? Yeah. Okay. So normally that's how we like to end like every episode. So Samuel, this has been really I would say a very powerful episode. I hope our viewers will enjoy it, not just for the network issues. So thank you for breaking things down so clearly, some very technical aspects. To our listeners, if you're a startup founder or a tech leader, this episode actually gives you more of a blueprint for building security into your startup while you're scaling. And also, don't forget to subscribe to the CyberFootDy podcast. Share this episode wherever you find your podcasts with a founder that you care about, and stay safe online. See you in the next episode. Thank you.